Hello, everyone. Welcome. I see lots of people starting to come in. So we're just going to give everybody a minute or two before we get started to get settled. And while we're waiting, why don't you kind of pop your name and the name of your organization into the chat so that we can see where everybody's coming from. I know we have lots of people attending today from kind of all over Canada and from the States. There's always one. It's got to start with one. One person will put their name of their organization in the chat, and then they'll all spiral. This is what happens every time. There we go, Prathna. There they are. Oh, Georgian Bay from Ottawa, from Indiana. Welcome. I love when we have a nice mix of our Canadian and American friends all together on the call. Okay, we've got lots of people still coming in, but we are gonna get this show on the road. So first of all, thank you everybody for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. My name is Meredith. I'm Keela's head of marketing. We also have Stephanie, Keela's marketing specialist, helping us out today on the tech side of things. So you may see Steph in the chat or answering some of your technical questions. So feel free to say hello to her. Before we get started, I just want to start the session today by acknowledging that Keela's head office is located in Vancouver, which is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and give thanks for their generosity and hospitality on these lands and waters. If you're new to Keela, welcome. Keela is a donor management and fundraising platform that brings together all of the essential tools and features that fundraisers need to succeed. Keela was also built by fundraisers for fundraisers. I myself was a fundraiser before joining Keela, as were many people on the Keela team. And we have a deep-rooted understanding of the nonprofit sector and have channeled that knowledge and experience into creating a platform that caters to your unique needs. So on behalf of everyone at Keela, welcome again. Today's session is going to be about 45 minutes in length, plus a 10 to 15 minute Q&A session at the end. Throughout the presentation, please feel free to write any questions you have in the chat box or in the Q&A, and we'll be sure to get to as many of them as we can. Speaking of the chat box, please remember to select everyone when you type so that all of our guests today can read your comments and questions. And finally, the webinar is being recorded. You will receive access to the recording via email before the end of this week. And just before I introduce our expert speaker today, I am going to quickly pass it over to Iman from Imagine Canada to introduce Grant Connect.
Thanks, Meredith. Hi, everyone. My name is Iman Khan, and I am the Senior Coordinator for Client Success and Corporate Citizenship at Imagine Canada. I am calling in from Toronto today, which is located on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. I am excited to be here with you all today to learn more about prospect research for nonprofits. Before we get started, I'm happy to take a moment to talk about Imagine Canada's fundraising platform, Grant Connect. Grant Connect is one of Canada's oldest social enterprises, and it actually dates back to 1966, back when it used to be a big physical book called the Directory. Drawing on more than 50 years of research experience to provide subscribers across the sector with high-quality funder data, our mission is to help Canadian charities and nonprofits find funders and opportunities that align with their work and their values, and save time doing so. We all know how much time it can take to find quality funding opportunities, and Grant Connect helps with that by offering data on well over 11,000 Canadian foundations, over 500 corporations, hundreds of government grant programs, as well as many other funding sources, including international opportunities as well. Grant Connect is a user-friendly platform designed for fundraisers, development officers, prospect researchers, nonprofit and charity executives, as well as social entrepreneurs and students entering the sector. The platform is specifically designed to make prospect research a seamless process for anyone working on their organization's fundraising portfolio. So that's all from me today, but if you do want to learn more about Grant Connect or have any suggestions at all for making the platform more useful for you and your organizations, please do feel free to email us at grantconnect@imaginecanada.ca. I'll drop that in the chat as well. And thanks in advance to Meredith, Stephanie, Alex, and Selene for this very relevant and what I'm sure will be a really informative webinar. Over to you, Meredith.
Thanks, Iman. So I am very excited to welcome our expert speaker for today, Selene Hur. Selene is the Manager of Prospect Development at the YMCA of Greater Toronto. She has taught for several years at Humber College at the graduate level and previously at Georgian College as well. Selene has also presented at several conferences with a focus on prospect research fundamentals and is a board member of APRA, Toronto Wildlife Centre, and the past president of APRA Canada. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Selene.
Thank you, Meredith. And just as we got started, I couldn't get the slides to advance. Hopefully that's the extent of my tech difficulties. Thank you everyone for joining. I saw based on the registration information and some of the chat, people introducing themselves, that we've got a variety of attendees from all different organizations, small, medium, large, lots of different sectors from across Canada and even some from the US. I want to give a special shout out to anyone in the arts, which is where I got my start and still hold that very close to my heart. So today's session is geared towards people who are new to prospect research, just getting started, or you're just simply curious about what it's about, and as well major gift fundraisers who work in smaller fundraising teams who might not be fortunate enough to have a researcher to work with. I have to say that it was a bit of a challenge to determine what to pack into this short webinar. I've gotten used to sort of presenting this topic over a 7-week course at Humber College. So it was an activity in trying to be concise. And so I hope that, my efforts will shine through and you'll leave with some good nuggets of information once I take you through some of the fundamental concepts, research basics, and share some resources and tips. So getting started, we know that, simply by opening the newspaper, reading news online, as we see posts on LinkedIn, even just, going to your own inbox or mailbox, that we live in a very competitive environment where, there are multiple charities and worthy causes vying for attention and donations. So in this type of environment, it's the high performance fundraising teams that really come out on top. And fundraisers enjoy a lot of glory when they secure large donations and hit their revenue targets. But more often than not, there's a prospect researcher or a team of researchers that has helped to ensure that success. And it's the facts and figures that are uncovered about a prospect that are combined with relationships and connections that help a fundraiser develop those meaningful relationships with a prospect who has since become a donor. Prospect research really makes the fundraising activity more efficient and effective, among many things. So in other words, all the bits and pieces of information compiled and analyzed through prospect research, prospect development professionals, it's all used so that the right prospect is asked by the right person at the right time for the right gift. And one of our goals is to prepare the fundraiser for all those right factors. I want to emphasize that in today's session about prospect research, when I talk about major gifts, I define that as any donation of $10,000 or more. This can really vary from organization to organization, depends on the size of the organization mostly. So, somebody who works in a larger university setting, they might think, $10,000 is not considered a major gift in their organization. But for us at the YMCA of Greater Toronto, that's where we set it. If you work for a smaller organization, maybe $1,000 is considered a major gift. What's important is that your team defines it and you use it consistently, and there's understanding about what that is. What you learned today can be helpful in researching organizations, but I just want to point out that I will be focused more on researching individuals. Of course, what you learn will be helpful, but I can tell you that there can be a whole nother webinar focused on foundation research or, prospecting for corporate donors. I also want to mention that you might hear me saying prospect research as well as prospect development professionals. The two terms are interchangeable. Prospect development professionals is a term that was introduced more recently because it acknowledges the fact that those of us in research, we do oftentimes do more than just research. We are involved in relationship management, management of the relationships with prospects and donors. We help to manage relationships with fundraisers, amongst fundraisers. We also get involved with campaign planning. So it's a lot broader than just doing research on a prospect. Prospect development professionals, as I mentioned, they really enhance the ability of a fundraiser to translate the fundraising priorities of an organization to the most relevant prospective donor, so that nobody's time is being wasted. The prospect's time isn't being wasted, the fundraiser's time isn't being wasted by pursuing the wrong leads. On a long-term basis, effective focus on major gift prospects and fundraising is really the way that will help an organization effectively and efficiently fundraise. We are focused on people with the greatest wealth capacity, the philanthropic inclination that matches your organization's mission, and as well as matching that personal interest with your organization. So what does it take to be a good researcher? Off the top of my mind, I think of someone who is curious, who is persistent. You have an eye for detail. You're a systematic thinker. You have the ability to go through a lot of information and synthesize it and interpret it for others. You also have strong communication skills, and you're a strategic thinker. And the strategic thinking part is important because prospect researchers are considered strategic partners of fundraisers, where when you work together with a fundraiser and share different perspectives and insights, that is where you will see fundraising success. Some of the roles of a prospect researcher are listed here, and as I mentioned, it can go beyond this, which is why we are often referred to as prospect development professionals too, not just focused on research. Before I go further into what exactly prospect research is about, I want to highlight the importance of understanding the fundraising cycle, especially from a major gift perspective. Some of you might have seen this chart before or a variation of it. It's the cycle starting from identification and going through to stewardship, which indicates sort of all the different stages that you take with a prospect and until they become a donor. And I won't go through each of these stages in terms of what a fundraiser does, but I can point out how prospect research plays a significant role in each stage of the cycle. So at the identification stage, we think about who does the organization know who could support a particular project or a particular cause. We look for new prospects. This can be quite challenging depending on what you're trying to fundraise for. If it's a large prospect requiring lots of large gifts, you might go through 4, 5, or 8 prospects just to secure one gift. If it's a unique project where there's a niche market, you might have 2 or 3 strong or viable prospects that you will have luck with. So at this identification stage, the prospect researcher can prepare a list of names, source from the organization's database, from donor lists of similar organizations, et cetera, et cetera. I'll give you some more ideas in terms of where you can start identifying prospects for your organization. The next stage is qualification, where you've got a list of names. Now what do you do, right? What happens to these names? You need to think about how to determine, who might be a strong prospect or not. And that's where you can develop a system to rank or prioritize them. In a later slide, I'll talk about LAI, which is the acronym for linkage, ability, and interest, which is one way of rating and prioritizing prospects. At this stage of qualification, you are looking for people who have a current or past link with the organization, people who have the ability to give, based on income, disposable income, wealth indicators of different types, as well as just their areas of interest, and whether philanthropy is something that you can see in their history. Do they even have an interest in your particular cause? Is there a volunteer that helps your organization who might be connected to this particular prospect? And is there any information that the volunteer could provide you with? Because as researchers, we are looking at publicly available information. We don't have that crystal ball. We can't source information from someone's head. So we do need the help of fundraisers and volunteers to help with that second stage of qualification. At the cultivation phase, that's where research can help as well, as the fundraiser or volunteer, starts building the relationship with a prospect. They bring back information from a meeting that they've had, and as a researcher, you go through those meeting notes and see if there's any further research that you can do to help the fundraiser. This is where the relationship between the fundraiser and researcher is really important as well, where if a fundraiser has completed a meeting with our team, we encourage everyone to write call reports so that they let the team know, what they learned at the meeting, and the information is shared for further research. And more importantly, the information is put into our database so that in the future we can see sort of the progression of the relationship, and it's part of that institutional knowledge. Then we get to and I should mention that cultivation phase is probably one of the longest phases, as those in fundraising, experience in fundraising know, with major gifts in particular, that cultivation phase can take up to 2 years. Then you have solicitation, which is, sometimes the scariest part of the relationship, where the fundraiser finally, makes that ask. But if you've done your research, you've been cultivating the relationship well, then the fundraiser should have a good sense of what to ask for and whether the timing is right, and if the right person is asking for that donation. Where research can help is keeping an eye on the news. For example, has that person's business recently come across any challenges, or is there a significant milestone coming up? They might learn about life changes related to the individual. Those are timing things that are important, that might indicate to the fundraiser, oh, now's not the right time to make the ask, right? So there's a lot of two-way communication between the fundraiser and researcher as you lead up to that, the solicitation phase. And then finally, stewardship is, in other words, we call it, you're cultivating that donor for the next gift. So you go through the whole cycle again and continue building the relationship and doing research where, it might help. And before I dive into, research techniques and resources, I always like to cover ethics first. Sometimes when I describe my job to others, even to, some people in fundraising, the first reaction is, oh, so you're really good at stalking people, right? And earlier in my career, it's something I used to laugh off, but now, older and wiser as a professional researcher, I use that opportunity to educate others about, what prospect research is about and clear up misconceptions about what we do and how we do our jobs. And I really encourage you to do the same, to build awareness about what prospect research is about and how it helps with fundraising. Prospect research is not creepy. It's not about stalking. We use publicly available information from verifiable, credible sources. We definitely don't include information from hearsay or gossip. We respect the prospect's confidentiality, their privacy, and we are transparent about how we go about doing our work. We don't sneak around or do anything illegal to obtain information. Prospect research is about providing fundraising intelligence. And I hope that I made it clear in the previous slide that we really enable fundraisers to do their best, how they can use their time wisely and not to waste the time of a prospect as well. The community of prospect development professionals operates within a set of principles, ethics, and compliance, which starts by noting that prospect development professionals must balance a constituent's right to privacy with the needs of their organizations to collect, analyze, record, and disseminate information. And for further information, I highly encourage you to check out those links to see what the statement of ethics is about. And the second link there has really great resources to various toolkits and other sites that can help you. So I threw in this slide because it always makes me laugh. Sausages and hot dogs. It just I think most people enjoy eating sausages and hot dogs, but we never want to know what's put into that casing, right? We just want to enjoy it and be ignorant about the contents. And so I pulled this up because there's a researcher at one point I saw somewhere online, and I can't believe I can't remember the source, but this person said, research is like sausage. Everyone likes it, but no one wants to know what goes into it. And it's so accurate because prospect research, you'll see in the next few slides, it can be a lot of work. And it can be especially frustrating when you put a lot of time into it, researching a particular prospect, pulling together a list of potential prospects. And yet, you'll come up empty. You won't find anything on a particular prospect, or, this prospect doesn't get added to the pipeline for further exploration. And, sometimes it takes a lot of time to produce nothing. But, you're checking all your sources, you're making sure you've got all your bases covered, and yet you still come up empty. But I have to say that, those moments of frustration or disappointment, those are really balanced out by the team's successes and everything that you help make possible. So I hope you'll keep that in mind every time you think, that you've gone down the rabbit hole, or, you've wasted, 2 hours and you've come up empty. So getting into the meat of it, we want to think about, how do you start and identify individual prospects? I always start with a list. I develop a list, whether it's, starting from scratch or going through a volunteer's, LinkedIn network, their contact list. You will always end up with a list of some sort. And I have to say that this part of building a list, which then helps to feed the prospect pipeline. This is the creative aspect of prospect research that I quite enjoy. It's where you get a chance to, think about how many different ways can we solve this problem, right? Like how many different ways can we source this list? I'll just mention that there's this diagram of concentric circles that Hank Rosso has developed. It's quite old. I can't remember when it was established, but it's called Concentric Circles of Giving. And it basically represents an organization's universe. So at the center of the circle, if you can imagine, you know, sort of like a bullseye, it indicates the people that are closest, the nearest and dearest to your organization, right? So that can be your internal database of donors, alumni, grateful patients, ticket buyers, etc. As you move further and further out in the levels of the circle, they are also prospects in your organization's universe. It's just that they're further removed and they're less connected. And that's where, you know, you might start looking into, you know, other industries that are relevant to your particular charity. It might be, you know, individuals who live close to your facility but aren't involved at all. It can go as far out as, you know, those top rich 100 lists. You know, those, most of those individuals are probably the furthest removed from your organization. So I would say that the best place to start is really within that bullseye, right? Those are the people that are already known to your organization. They know you, they've supported you in some respect in the past or even currently. So, you know, those would be your board members, your volunteers, your current and past donors, people who have attended an event in the recent past. These are the people that you would start with. And then all those other bullet points are other, it's just a small collection of other places that you can start looking. As you develop the list, you also want to think about, you know, what's the best way to compile your list? Do you build an Excel spreadsheet? Do you start putting all the information into a database? And I have to say that, you know, if you have a dedicated data entry resource or, you know, admin support, then I would really encourage you to get all the information into a database, you know, into all the relevant fields, you know, the name, the title of the person, the organization, addresses, any other, you know, research bits of information. The reason why it's good to get the information in the database in those particular fields is that you can be able to pull lists in the future more easily. You'll be able to segment the information based on their needs. And as well, more importantly, you know, you'll have historical tracking in terms of the types of activities that you've done, people that you've identified in the past, and you'll be able to know, you know, which prospects have been considered before and what's the status. But if you have limited resources, such as myself, I am a solo researcher. I always start with an Excel list, and then I determine what types of information to put into the database and in what format. I unfortunately don't have time to populate all the specific fields in the database. So sometimes I just, you know, copy and paste all my research findings and put it in a notepad within Razor's Edge, which is the database that we use. I know it's not ideal, but, you know, we make do with what we have. But I do make sure that I get it into the database in some form or another. You can also make the call in terms of, you know, maybe all the information lives in an Excel spreadsheet until, you know, a fundraiser decides to take on that name, or, you know, a volunteer connection is found. Then you can put the information into the database for the future tracking. So it depends on your situation, I would say. And again, it's dictated by the resources, you know, human resources and time that's available. Once you have some lists, you know, you think about what's the next step, right? You can do some quick research to further qualify a prospect. And you can, you know, just pull together their title, the company, some of their recent giving information, and, you know, where have they recently been involved as a volunteer. I would say that those bits of information are helpful so that you are validating for yourself, first of all, you know, why this name is on a list. There's good reason for the name to be on a list. And as well, when this list is shared with others, you can basically, you have your case in terms of proving why this person should be considered, right? I think the most difficult part of pulling together this list is finding out who is connected to this particular prospect and who is going to be able to help, open that door and help the fundraiser book that introductory call with a prospect. How do you take it from, simply a name on a page, a name on a list, to that first meeting? That's where you can get the help of volunteers and, the fundraisers, and you present the information in what I call prospect review template. And I use an Excel spreadsheet. Basically, all the fields that you see here would be individual columns per prospect. And this can be used, just presented to whoever's reviewing the list. In terms of a prospect review session, you might present all this information, or sometimes it just might be the prospect name, title, and company. It depends on who you're working with. And I would like to say that, when you produce anything, any research products for the team that you're working with, or any volunteers, you do want to get an understanding of how they like to work and how you can best support them. So that's why, some of those fields I have in brackets, because sometimes, a particular volunteer just might want to see the name, title, and company, and they can quickly say yes or no, I know these people or don't, and I'm willing to help. Other times, volunteers will want to see a little bit more information, because that might, jog their memory. So if they see a prospect's name and they see that this person was involved in a board, or they sit on, a corporate board where they might have some connection, that might help make the connection as well. So it varies from relationship to relationship with the volunteers and the fundraisers. The items below that dotted line are the additional columns that are specific to volunteers that I like to throw in. So, it's information that you're getting from the volunteer or getting from the fundraiser. So when they look at the list of names and titles and companies, the volunteer can say, yes, I know this person, but they might not be willing to, contact them, because they might just know them, but they don't feel comfortable enough, or the relationship isn't there, right? But the second level is, yes, I know that person and I'm willing to contact them on your behalf. And then the best is that third column, that third category, where the volunteer says, yes, I know them, I'm willing to contact them, or, the fundraiser can contact them and I'm willing to come and attend a meeting with you. That's the best part, where you have that personal connection. Moving beyond that list of names on a spreadsheet, you might be asked to do a little bit more in-depth research. And I have to say that I don't often, it's been a while since I've had to pull together a profile with all these categories of information, because I found that, especially as a solo researcher, I could become that bottleneck, right? It can take quite a while, sometimes up to 2 hours, 4 hours to pull together all that information for a full profile. More often than not, I'm providing something that I call a snapshot, which is, sometimes it can just be, 5 bullet points, or it can be, 20 bullet points with relevant information that, fall into these categories. And it's really something to get the fundraiser going, and something to prove that, yes, this is a viable prospect and worth going for a discovery call, worth trying to work with a volunteer on, trying to develop the connection and find that relationship. So oftentimes I'm providing snapshots with the relevant information. The other reason why I don't like to pull together a full profile, because you have to remember that, as researchers, we're pulling information from publicly available sources. And just like you and I, you know, everyday people, our whole lives are not on the internet, right? And everything is not available. So if I pull together a full profile, that just shows, you know, what's available out there. It's not everything about a particular individual. So when you pull together a full profile, it could cause some preconceived notions about a prospect, and sometimes they're unwarranted. So that's why I highly encourage you to shift the team towards accepting snapshots, things, pieces of information that show that this is a viable prospect. It's worth trying to develop a relationship and learn more about the prospect, you know, firsthand through a meeting with them. As well, you know, when you're doing research on prospects, you can quickly get overwhelmed with information out there. So I like to, even though I might not be producing full profiles, I like to have this checklist in my mind, or, you know, side of my desk, just to keep me on track and keep me focused on the types of information that I'm looking for. And it's really easy to go down a rabbit hole. So when you start looking at these, you know, bullet points, these categories, it really focuses you on what's the point of finding this information, and whether it's relevant or not to include. So for example, you know, why do we look at corporate directorships? That's an indicator of where the prospect is connected. It might help you find further connections, how to reach that prospect through, you know, first or second degree relationships. The career, obviously, you know, based on the workplace and job titles, that can be an indicator of wealth. And gifts to other organizations, that's useful information. You can get a sense of what the person's interests are, whether they're philanthropic, how philanthropic they are, you know, what giving levels are they at. But again, like I said before, you can spend a lot of time and sometimes come up with nothing. There's a lot of times where, you know, people prefer to give anonymously. And just because you're not finding any information about a prospect doesn't mean that they're not supporting the community. It just might mean that, you know, they have most of their life offline, and they like to give anonymously. I should highlight that anytime I pull together research findings, whether it's, you know, in a list format like the previous slide in the prospect review list, or in a snapshot or a full profile, I always add a watermark or, you know, footer on the document, marking the document confidential. You know, whether the document is shared with a fundraiser or a volunteer that's helping to fundraise, I want to make it very clear that the document should be treated carefully, and that it's confidential information. So you can even go a little bit further and add a one-line note about how the information was prepared with due diligence and gathered from publicly available sources, and, you know, internal data from your own database. I just noticed that there's a bit of a time check there. I have 10 minutes, so I might go through the next few slides a bit quickly. Like I said, it was a bit of a challenge to think about how to condense 7 weeks of information into less than 1 hour, but I will do my best. So this next slide is about LAI, as I had mentioned previously: linkage, ability, and interest. So when you are doing research on an individual, these are the questions that you should keep in mind. These help you stay focused on the information you're looking for, and as well help you prioritize, you know, whether or not the person is a good prospect or not, or might be a stronger prospect or a weaker prospect. So some of these questions are, you know, related to linkage: who can provide advice related to this prospect, who can make an introduction, who has influence. So that can be gathered from, you know, determining what boards the individual sits on, who knows them, as well, you know, has the person been involved with your charity at some point in the past? You know, have they bought tickets from your organization before? Maybe their kids, you know, attended your organization's day camps in the past. There's some sort of connection there, right? Ability is, you know, we're doing prospecting for major gifts, right? So great if you find someone who's made a lot of $100 gifts here and there, but that individual is probably not the right prospect for you if you're looking for major gift prospects. So you want to look at donors that have made significant gifts in the recent past and use that to rank whether or not this person is a good prospect or not for your particular purpose. And then there's interest or inclination. Does the person have any interest in philanthropy at all? Have they been involved in the community? Have they made donations? Have they volunteered to causes that are similar to that of your organization? There are so many different ways, so many other questions related to LAI that I can get into, but this is just to get you started. I'll provide an example of how you can use LAI to rate prospects. So the simple example could be that, you know, if you work for an independent theater company and you come across a prospect, you will take the interest category, for example, and on a scale of 1 to 5, you can rate the person who's made several donations of $25,000 or more to, you know, opera, the art gallery, and symphony in the past 3 years. You could rate that person as a 4 out of 5 in terms of interest, right? So higher ranking prospect. In comparison, you know, you might find another prospect who's also been generous, but their donations of $25 or more, or $25,000 or more, has been directed to, you know, universities, hospitals, and maybe, you know, an opera donation. That one you might rate more of as a, you know, 2 out of 5, not because, you know, they're not, they don't have the ability to give or that they don't have an interest in giving. It's just that the causes that they have given to are not as well aligned to what you do at an independent theater company. Now, here are some resources that can be useful to you. I've got a couple of slides of free resources and ones with that are paid resources. And because of time, I'm not going to be going through each of them one by one, but I would like to highlight a few. And I have to note that this is not, and by no ways, an exhaustive list. That could go on for pages and pages, but this is just to get you started. And with practice and experience, you'll be able to build your own checklist of free and reputable resources, or, you know, paid resources that you prefer to use. I've broken this down in terms of categories that can help to distinguish the primary area of focus for a particular resource. But definitely, you know, some of these resources can be used to give you intelligence from multiple angles. For example, you know, if you're looking at obituaries, that can give you a lot of insight into the person's family, connections, their career, and philanthropic interests. I would encourage you to check out your public library. They have amazing resources online as well as, you know, hard copy, and librarians are always happy to help people research. They are so skilled and highly trained. They're really happy when they get to talk to a researcher and they get to introduce you to some resources. So I highly encourage you to do that. As you can see, I've listed a few free resources that you can get that are, you know, paid by our own tax dollars. In terms of Google or DuckDuckGo, which is an alternative, the key is to use, you know, the right keywords, synonyms, phrases, and check out the advanced search option. So I'll leave it at that and let you explore it on your own. The second slide of more free resources. These are related to philanthropic interests, and someone's involvement, as well as several related to wealth. For CRA, for example, a lot of you have probably visited the CRA site and searched for charities. What you can find there, aside from information on particular foundations and the directors and assets, these can also be an indicator of family wealth. Families have established foundations as a way to make their donations in a tax efficient manner. So that's often how I will just get a little bit more information about the family. The other ones, CEDAR and SETI, the last two items on the list, those I can tell you that there are specific webinars that you can sign up to dive into those details. And it's really helpful when you do become familiar with the resources that are available there if you're looking into individuals who work at publicly traded companies. And then finally, we have some online resources that are fee-based, and I encourage you to check out different vendors. They often have free demos and free trial periods, so you can take time to, run a query on your own, or, look up a few names. There are some vendors who offer lower subscription fees based on the size of your organizational budget as well. So, that's really conducive to smaller organizations who have limited budgets. As a solo researcher, I have to say that I've been a longtime subscriber of Grant Connect and iWave, mostly due to my experience with them and personal preference with their layout and how I do searches on them. You can connect with me afterwards if you'd like to hear more about my experience. I always have vendors contacting me, trying to get me to, try out their tools, their resources, and I do try them out because it's always good to, stay aware of what else is out there. But I keep going back to Grant Connect and iWave because it's what I'm used to, and I've been happy with what I've been getting through there. And honestly, as a solo researcher, there are only so many resources that I can afford to cover, and there's only so much time in the day that I can use them. If you don't have a budget at all, you'll rest assured that you can still compile lots of publicly accessible information, based on those few resources I shared in the past 2 slides. Just know that, it'll be a little bit more time consuming. And to reassure people who have no or very little budgets, I always, tell people that you will be able to find lots of information. And even when I teach, one of the assignments that I give my students is, please complete this profile, but using only free resources, and see how creative they can get in terms of, keyword searches and using the public library and all those resources that I mentioned before. And, as you get more and more experienced, you'll become more adept at searching, and it will take you less time as well. And you'll end up developing your own list of preferred sources. Another great resource is APRA Canada, and this textbook basically that APRA Canada volunteers put together a few years ago. I have links there, so please do feel free to check them out. This textbook is the primary book that I teach from. If you're a researcher just starting off, or even if you're experienced, do check it out. Lots of great tips and theory in there. And if you're a fundraiser, you don't have a researcher to work with, this is really great knowledge to take in. It will really help you. APRA Canada is a really good resource. It's good for networking, attending webinars that they offer. There's an APRA Canada conference every 2 years. APRA Canada is where I got my start. I first volunteered at a conference, then I applied and received a scholarship to attend a conference the following year. Then I got involved with the board, and it goes on and on and on. And I have to say that it's been so beneficial for me in terms of networking, learning, and and giving back as well as a mentor, as I continue to do nowadays. And APRA Canada's membership is only $40 a year per person. There's also institutional rates available if you're buying more than one membership per organization. And then APRA International is that third link there, aprahome.org. That's the international body. That's APRA's headquarters. Check them out. They've got lots of other resources and lots of different membership options as well. And before we go into questions, I just want to share something that I've been really proud of in my career is this textbook case. Basically, back in 2018, we were starting to fundraise for this YMCA in the east end of Toronto on Kingston Road. And I was asked to put together a list of prospects. So I started looking at, the donor list of organizations in the area. I started looking at business owners, and I built a list, and in the end came up with a solid list of 30 names that was presented to a group of volunteers. Of those 30 names, we had 8 names that were identified by the volunteers, including one volunteer who was really keen to make an introduction to a member of the Stavro family. So Stavro, some of you might be familiar with the name. Steve Stavro was a Macedonian Canadian businessman. He established Nob Hill Farms. He became a grocery store magnate. He owned several sports teams, became a director of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and got into racehorse industry. So this was the family that we were trying to connect with. And basically, I developed a discovery profile for the volunteer's first meeting with a member of the Stavro family. He had a really great meeting. He was invited back for more. So then I developed a more in-depth profile, and the YMCA was invited to present a proposal to the Family Foundation. There were further discussions between the YMCA and this foundation and the family members. And it resulted in one of the largest gifts in the YMCA's history at the time. And this was funding to name the YMCA out in the East End, which is called the Steve and Sally Stavro Family YMCA. And the most amazing part is that all of this happened within 2 months, which is quite unbelievable, because as I had mentioned previously, most major gifts take about 2 years to come to fruition. This was just a matter of, right person, right connection, right time, and the foundation's, giving decisions. And I think the cherry on top was that through one of the meetings, we learned that Steve Stavro, when he first came to Canada, he relied on the YMCA to sort of get his feet on the ground. So a really good success story that I always like to brag about. And so that brings us to the end. I just want to share a few takeaways. I would say that identifying prospects and doing the research is not necessarily difficult, but it's the skills that you need that require some practice. And as you can see, it's time consuming. And you need to be strategic about how you spend your time, especially if you're part of a small team. My second takeaway would be get to know your colleagues, the fundraisers. Prospect researchers and fundraisers are really driven to succeed, to meet the same goal, but we have very different motivational factors. At the same time, we have complementary skill sets, and when you bring together those skills and different perspectives, you can really enhance your fundraising efforts. And frankly, it makes the work environment so much more enjoyable when you get along with your colleagues. And then finally, third tip is that you should get inspired by best practice. That is, adapt, right? So be open to learning new ideas, looking at best practice examples, go to webinars, conferences, and all that, but don't get caught up in the fear of missing out. You might see an amazing presentation, they've got these amazing visuals and research results and all that, but keep in mind that especially if you're in a small team, there's no need for you to go to that extent. focus on your own organization's needs. What makes sense? What can you adapt to help your team do its best? Thank you very much.
Okay, wow. Thank you, Selene. There's so much good information in there. I can tell by the questions coming in that everybody is, finding incredible value in what you presented today. So thank you. We're going to get to a couple questions, and anybody that we can't get to, Selene has put her LinkedIn and her email there, so feel free to connect with her. But the first question that we got in is asking if there are any ethical or legal issues about using tools like political party donor lists for prospecting new donors.
Political party lists?
Yeah.
If it depends on how they're sourced, right? If the lists have been, if those lists were compiled specifically for an organization where people have paid to do so, and people have provided their information knowing that their names and information are used for certain purposes, then you shouldn't be using the information. Like, I would say the most comparable is, for example, I think most of you are probably familiar with, like, the Young Presidents Organization, right? It's a closed membership organization. They pay fees to be part of that group. If somebody who's a member says, oh, I can access our membership list and share it with you, and you can check it out and see who might be good prospects, I would say that's definitely a no-go, because people have agreed to share their information on that contact list for YPO's specific needs, not to be prospected for other organizations.
Okay, great. I see a lot of questions coming in about tools and resources and things like that. And we are going to share Selene's slides as in the follow-up email. So you'll get that before the end of the week. So you'll get links to everything that she was sharing. So just for all those people asking questions about all the incredible resources Selene mentioned today, don't worry, we will get those over to you. But our next question is, in a small shop with limited time and resources to dedicate to prospecting, what do you think the most effective and efficient tool would be?
I'm sorry, I was fiddling with my tech here. Can you just repeat the question again?
Yeah, of course. In a small shop with limited time and resources to dedicate to prospecting, what do you think the most effective and efficient tool would be?
Google. Google. If you don't have any resources at all, just get really good about using the right keywords. Try out that advanced search option. Going to the public library as well. Like I said, there's lots of resources available there. And DuckDuckGo was the other sort of web browser search engine that I had mentioned. And I'd like to point out that with DuckDuckGo, it doesn't track your search history, which can be beneficial, because with Google, once you start searching with certain words again, they obviously prioritize the results that are presented to you. So sometimes you might miss something because Google is basically filtering it out for you, thinking that they're helping you with your search, right? But you should try both, actually. Do a search on Google, do something on DuckDuckGo, see which you prefer, and with practice, you'll see which one gives you the best results.
Okay, great. I think we have time for one more before we close it out, but do you have any suggested queries to start mining your database and identify prospects?
I would say one would be, it's something called RFM analysis. That stands for recency, frequency, monetary value. So recency, when was the last time somebody gave, right? In combination with frequency, how often have they given? And in combination with monetary value, what's the giving amount, right? So it could be you're pulling this list and you're finding donors who have given, $10,000 a year, every year on a regular basis. And that can, that's a place to start. I mean, there are so many different combinations and, variations that I can think of, but Google it, right? RFM analysis, and that will give you some pointers. You can also look at, querying your longtime members. When did they first start becoming a member? When did they first buy their ticket? You can look at postal codes. What are the wealthy postal codes, and pull people who live in those wealthy postal codes, see if you can find any connections to those people. If you track information like company, industry, or people's titles, you can query, all the VPs and up, right? And those are people that are more likely to have wealth than people that are not at that VP level. Yeah, I could go on and on. So hopefully
I feel like we could do prospect research part 2 webinar, and then probably parts like 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we are at time, so that does conclude the session today. Thank you so much again, Selene. I hope everybody is leaving today ready to kind of dive into the world of prospect research. And again, feel free to connect with Selene on LinkedIn or reach out to us at Keela. We're always happy to help. Before we go, I just want to let you know that there will be a very short survey that will pop up right after the session. It should only take you about 20 seconds, not 20 minutes to complete. And we would greatly appreciate hearing your feedback. We also have our next webinar coming out next Tuesday, June 6th, with Julia Campbell, called How to Drive Donations and Get Engagement Using Social Media. And Stephanie will be leaving the link in the chat to register for that webinar. So thank you again, Selene, and thank you to everybody for joining today. And we hope to see you at the next Key Labs webinar.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing from some of you.
Thanks, everybody.